Alright, peace be upon you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I just want to deal with a few of the Christian objections against the Quran, and I want to show how, not everybody, but how a lot of them, at least the way they use these arguments, it really, it shows how they're biased from the beginning, and how no matter what evidence you bring for the sanctity of the Quran, the validity of the Quran, they're not willing to accept it. These questions they ask you, they're not really coming from an honest place, but rather they're just there to try to catch your words and prove you wrong, quote unquote, while giving more justification for them to follow their own religion. So I'm going to show you how these are very, very common objections. I'm sure that you've heard them many times when talking about the Quran to Christians, but I'm going to show you how they both play off each other, and they trap the Muslims. So, but when you see what's really going on, then you're able to tell that none of this was a genuine and honest inquiry in the first place. So, I'm sure many of you have heard this when many Christians will say that, the Muhammad plagiarized the Bible. He plagiarized it, he copied it, and this is what they'll use to explain the marked similarity that the Quran has to many parts of the Bible: the philosophy, the teaching, the law, the prophets, believing in one God, doing good deeds. When it's in line with the Bible, well, it's because Muhammad plagiarized it, of course. He took that from other sources and he added that into the Quran. Okay, fine. So now the Quran is very similar to the Bible. Okay, I have that in mind now. The Quran is similar to the Bible, and it's because Muhammad copied and plagiarized it. Fine. Then, in the same conversations, Christians will say to you, when there is a difference between the biblical statements and the Quranic statements, so, for example, the classic controversy of the crucifixion of Jesus. The Bible says that Jesus was crucified, and the Quran says he was not crucified, but it was made to appear as so. And then they'll say, you see, it's teaching a radically different religion. It's something totally foreign. Muhammad is inventing his own thing. And it's like, what do you do? When the Quran is similar, it's a plagiarism. And when the Quran is different, then it's a radically different thing. And Muhammad is going off on his own whim, inventing a foreign religion, which is not at all existent within the Old Testament, within the Bible at all. And it's like, what do you do at that point, right? Which is it? Is the Quran so similar to the Bible that Muhammad obviously plagiarized it, quote unquote? Or is it so radically different that he's obviously teaching a new religion and inventing his own thing? Can't answer that question. Now, let us analyze both of these statements in light of what the Quran says. So, let's entertain the Quran for a second. God says that the Quran is a confirmation of the previous scriptures. It is a confirmation and control over, okay? God talks about those who write the words of God with their hands, and woe to them for what their hands write, and they pretty much sell their portion in the hereafter. They're going to the fire for writing things, claiming it's from God and it not being from God, okay? The Quran is a confirmation and control. If that is true, then we would expect to see a lot of similarities and a lot of differences as well with the Bible. The very phenomenon of seeing similarities and differences, it seems to suggest that the Quranic mission may be true. It may be doing what it claims to do, which is to confirm and act as a control, a furqan over all that was revealed, and to be a criteria by which we judge everything else. Because if the Quran is following upon the tradition of Moses and Abraham and confirming that, naturally there'll be a lot of similarities, because it's the same God, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, and the God of Muhammad, who's, he's talking about the same Lord. So that would explain the similarities we see with the Bible. And it's a control, it's a furqan, it's something that God has given us according to its claim to judge between what was revealed before and judge between other texts around the world. And that makes sense as well. If we were to see differences, like the fact that the Quran says that Jesus was not crucified, like the fact that the Quran says Jesus was not the Son of God, like the fact that the Quran, it contains, it says Harun did not commit that idolatry. In the Bible, you have Aaron committing the idolatry with the children of Israel, but in the Quran it's very clear that it was not Aaron that led them astray, or was not even a part of them going astray, but it was a Samiri that led them astray. And if the Quran is different, then that makes sense, because it's acting as a control. Do you see what I mean? The very fact that let's just say the Bible as we have it today, not the Torah, not the Injil, okay, that's a separate issue. The Bible as we have it today is perfect, it has no errors at all, then that would preclude the need for the Quran in the first place. It doesn't even make any sense. If we accept the Quran as valid, if we just entertain for a moment what it claims for itself, then we would expect to see similarities and differences. Similarities because it follows upon the same tradition, and differences because it corrects and acts as a control over things that people have added in. So, this is how you get yourself out of the trap that a lot of these Christians will put you in. Oh, you know, obviously he stole from the Old Testament, he plagiarized it. Muhammad copied everything in the Old Testament. Okay, fine. He plagiarized these stories in the Bible, yet somehow he left out all of the errors and the degeneracy that's within the Old Testament. So he somehow forgot. Meanwhile, he's illiterate as well, at least in their claim. And the Christians will say he's illiterate. I don't believe he's illiterate. The Quran doesn't suggest that he's illiterate. He's literally told, Iqra, read. He's supposed to read out of the Quran. But okay, he's an illiterate man in the desert of Arabia. We'll just accept that narrative. Then, okay, how is he reading the Bible and copying it, and also conveniently leaving out all of the things like Lot sleeping with his daughters, and Abraham pretending that his wife is his sister so that a stranger can sleep with her? What else is there? Aaron not committing idolatry, but really it was a Samiri. Does that... If let's say you and I were in a classroom, this is something I talk about in my book. If we're in a class and we're both writing the same test, the way the professor determines if you maybe copied my test or if I copied yours, a plagiarism has occurred, is they'll see if we made the same mistake. So if every one of the mistakes I make is the same ones that you make, so I call 2 + 2 5 and you also call 2 + 2 5, then that strongly suggests that one of us copied each other, that one of our works, one of our test writings is a plagiarism of the others, right? But we don't have that in the Quran. We have a lot of similarities with the Old Testament, as expected, in the Bible, because the Quran confirms those previous messengers and prophets, but we see the differences as well, and we see all of the deplorable things that are ascribed to them are missing within the Quran. So how can it be a plagiarism? But like I said before, you see that they catch you. They try to trap you when the Quran is similar. When you show the words of Jesus, at least in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the majority of the Old Testament, the Quran is far more in line in philosophy and spirit and doctrine and teaching than the words of Paul. Undoubtedly. You have in one camp focusing on God, the law, meriting righteousness, meriting the favor of God, meriting justification before the Lord. You have that in the Old Testament. You have that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which is, the Synoptic Gospels, and the Quran, which teaches that same message. Then you have Paul teaching something radically different. When you show the similarities of the Quran to the Bible, it's because Muhammad copied it. Then when you show some of the differences, for example, Jesus was not crucified, and some of the narratives that are different in the Quran, it's because Muhammad is inventing his own thing. You can't win with these people. You can't. When they're arguing with you like that, you know that there's nothing that could possibly be said about the Quran, nothing that the Quran you could show them within it to convince them, or at least have them entertain honestly the idea that maybe it's a faithful scripture, maybe it is following upon that Abrahamic tradition. No, because their hearts are already hard to begin with. They're just trying to catch you, and even if what they said previously is not consistent with what they're saying now, on the one hand, the Quran is so similar that it's obviously a plagiarism, but now, 10 minutes later in the conversation, it's obviously so different. Muhammad is inventing his own thing. It's all just rhetorical. It's not a genuine pursuing of the truth. It even goes into the claims these people make about Muhammad. So just let's think about it. One of the classic passages that the Christians will use is when in the Quran, when God tells the children of Israel to refer to the Tawrat and the Injil. Refer to the Tawrat and the Injil. Oh, you see, on the authority of Muhammad, right? Muhammad is telling you to follow the Bible. It doesn't mention the Bible, it mentions the Tawrat and the Injil. If you see the Quran, it makes it clear that the Tawrat was something given directly to Moses, and the Torah we have today cannot be what was directly given to Moses because it records his death in the past tense. Read Deuteronomy 35, it records his death in the past tense. So this wasn't something that could have been revealed directly to Moses. It's a story, it's so clear that what we have as the so-called Torah today is a story about Moses. It wasn't something given directly to him. And then with the Injil, I mean, we have these Gospels allegedly from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Nothing in the Gospels to suggest that they were written by them. They're not even eyewitnesses. Luke, they're stories about Jesus. Luke even admits in Luke chapter 1, verse 2, he says that I'm writing down the things which I've heard. It's not a first-hand witness of the guy who's writing it down. He's telling you things he's heard from somebody else. And, you know, if we accept, this is an argument that I've used in my debates as well, that the Gospels are an eyewitness account. I mean, Jesus only had disciples when he was an adult and he was preaching. But the Gospels record things when he's alone, when he's a baby. You know, the heavens opened up and it said, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." The Gospels as well, they record him when he's praying alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. He literally tells his disciples, "Stay here, I'm going to go yonder, I'm going to go alone to pray." And somehow somebody wrote down that prayer. No, obviously these aren't eyewitnesses. These are stories about Jesus, okay? And what we have with the Injil, at least how the Quran speaks about it, it's something that was given directly to Jesus himself. So the Torah and the Gospel cannot be possibly conflated with the Tawrat and the Injil of the Quran. That's a separate point. But what I was saying is, you know, on the one hand, they'll go based on the authority of the Quran. We now have to refer to the Bible. We have to refer to the Bible in order to give context to the Quran. See, Muhammad is telling you, the Quran is telling you, refer to the Torah and the Gospel. Okay. Yet, at the same time, Muhammad was trying, he was trying to kill Christians and Jews. He was just this terrorist, mass-killing warlord trying to take followers away from Judaism and Christianity. Again, which is it? Did Muhammad hold the Bible in high esteem, and now based on that authority we should follow what the Bible says because the Quran says for us to do that? Or was he a Jew killer and Jew murderer, Christian murderer? Did he hate Christians and their scriptures, and did he hate Jews and their scriptures, or did he love them and tell us to, and did he tell them to go and refer to him? It doesn't make any sense. On the one hand, he's this brilliant, cunning warlord able to rally up all of Arabia under his authority and under his command, yet at the same time he couldn't do basic inheritance math. This man was illiterate. He was an illiterate buffoon of Arabia, but somehow he was able to explicitly copy detailed accounts in the Bible, read them and copy them, but also change certain details for his own liking. None of this stuff makes any sense. So any of these Christian, Jewish criticisms against the Quran, you have to lay it out on a line and see whether one criticism they're making contradicts something they've said before. And when you do that, again, you will see that this is not an honest pursuit of the truth. What is true is that the Quran is a confirmation. It is a control, and that is the best explanation for why we see all those similarities and those few marked differences as well. The best explanation is what the Holy Quran claims for itself. But like I said, you're dealing with people who have a hardness in their heart, and God even says they recognize it as they recognize their own sons. They understand this. They understand this. You know, to try and compare the Quran to the Book of Mormon is just so fallacious. The Book of Mormon, it doesn't have anywhere even close to the influence, the power, the broad width that the Quran has. Clearly, the creator of the heavens and the earth has allowed this Quran to spread to every corner of the earth, like the Bible as well. He has made it famous. He has made it known. The Book of Mormon has nothing on the scholarship, the study that has gone into the Quran, the people who have dedicated their lives. It doesn't have the history or the scope that it does. So, and, you know, we know this, and they know this too, when they see all the similarities in the Quran, even more so than other writers within the Bible, like Paul. When we see the Quran being more in line with the law and the prophets, then they just say it's a plagiarism. And again, it's just this endless cycle. It just goes round and round and round. Can't win with these people. And think about it from a logical perspective as well. In the Quran, we have the narrative of Muhammad being told to tell the children of Israel to refer to the Torah, refer to the Injil, and they will see him there. They will see that what he's saying is totally in line with what they have. And let's just say that the books these people possessed back then is the exact same as what they have now, that they were reading out of the Bible that we have today, which I do not believe that. Definitely not. Again, the Torah and the Injil were something given directly to Moses, directly to Jesus. Not at all what we have today with these stories about Moses, these stories about Jesus, not even first-hand eyewitnesses. But when the Quran, it's like, why would Muhammad be saying that if Muhammad knew, and remember, he has access to the Bible, he's plagiarizing the Bible, right? If he was so knowledgeable at the Bible and about the Bible, and he knew about it, why would he tell them to refer to their own scriptures if he knew it would just debunk him in the first place? It doesn't even make any sense. If they had the Bible and they had this Gospel of John and all this stuff, which is clearly very different to what the Quran teaches, why would he tell them to go and refer to that? That would just discredit his own mission. Clearly, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Clearly, that we need to do a serious overhaul and look into the history of these books and where they came from and how long they've been around and how much they may or may not have been edited. Again, if he knew that the Christians and Jews, they taught something, and their scriptures, their books taught something radically different to what he's saying in his own invented Quran. Remember, he has to be able to know because he has access to the Old Testament. He's plagiarizing the Old Testament. Why would he go and tell them to refer to the very book which will debunk himself? It doesn't make any sense. When you analyze these things critically, you find their attacks against the Quran is nothing but a house of cards. But meanwhile, my genuine criticisms against the Bible, and specifically Paul, are unassailable. Go ahead and read my book. See what I have to say. You will see that Paul teaches a radically different religion to even the corrupt form the Gospels are in today. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they teach a different religion to Paul. No doubt about it. No questioning that. And really, this whole debate about Islam versus Christianity, the two biggest religions in the world, the Quran versus the Bible, the two most widely read books in the world, it boils down to who was the real prophet. Was it Paul or was it Muhammad? If Paul is the real prophet, then Islam is false, and the Quran as well. And if Muhammad is a real prophet, then Christianity and Paul is false. And if we can show Paul to be false, Paul wrote pretty much half the New Testament. Out of 9 authors in the New Testament, he wrote, I think, 28 books? He wrote 13 or something like that. He wrote basically half of the New Testament. And if we can discredit Paul, which you can read my book, you can see he follows a religion that is radically different to even what Jesus taught in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, then you've just invalidated the reliability of the whole New Testament, because its main dominant author is a phony. He's a fraud. So, again, whenever these people make these criticisms against the Quran, I want you guys to analyze it critically, analyze it closely, see it for what it is, okay? And check out my book. See who really was in line with the law and the prophets with what they taught. You will find differences in both. Paul taught something way different, and Muhammad taught something which is at least different to the Bible we have today, in some sense, right? You know, the racial supremacy is gone, some of the idolatry is gone, the degeneracy is gone, but overall, when we read the Bible, we see there is a dominant narrative that comes forth. Worship one God, do good deeds, keep his commandments, and specifically with respect to Jesus, the kingdom of heaven, talking about God and the hereafter. And you are going to see undoubtedly the Quran, that dominant narrative that is in the Bible, the Quran is far more consistent with it than the Bible. See, the issue with the Bible is it teaches multiple things. There's multiple competing narratives in there with various agendas, but this is another question that the Christians put forth, and it's a valid question. How can we, on the one hand, point to the Bible for justification of the Quran to show that the Quran is in line with it, yet at the same time disregard its passages that contradict the Quran? And my response to that would be, in the Bible, we get it's multiple books, multiple time periods, multiple conditions, multiple languages. We get multiple competing theologies and worldviews and ideas that contradict each other. But even within this corrupt collection known as the Bible, there is an overarching dominant narrative which gets muddy, it gets kind of unclear, it gets unfuzzy depending on which part. It gets fuzzy, not unfuzzy. It gets fuzzy depending on which part you read. You get into the Gospel of John and suddenly we're worshiping this ethereal platonic God-man Jesus. But within this confusing body of literature known as the Bible, there is a dominant theme of worshiping one God, the exclusivity of this God, the holding of his commandments, the whole thing. And it is that dominant major narrative within the Bible which the Quran is consistent with. So that's really how you respond to it. The reason I'm pointing to the Bible, yet at the same time denying certain passages in the Bible, is because I'm showing the connection the Quran has with the major themes within the Bible. That's it. And I disregard all the parts of the Bible that contradict the Quran and contradict the monotheistic law-holding parts of the Bible. It's not just that they contradict the Quran. Those very passages contradict much that is within the Bible as well. And that's why the Quran, it calls itself the dhikr, it calls itself the remembrance. So think of yourself as a child of Israel in the ancient world. There's these multiple texts floating around, and remember, the Bible, it's a work in progress. Christians to this day, they dispute on what book should be in there, what book should not. The error is in assuming that this collection, this library, is one thing with one consistent message, and it just isn't. So if I'm a child of Israel existing in the ancient world, and I'm hearing multiple scriptures being read, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Exodus, Gospel of John, just all kinds of books being read out. I hear these things, and I am receiving, I'll probably be confused because, again, they contradict each other, but, I'm going to see a dominant narrative coming forth in all of these scriptures which I'm hearing about, which is worshiping of one God, doing good deeds, holding his law. And then when Muhammad is coming to me, and I'm confused, right? I'm like, what's going on? I heard about this God-man Jesus. This seems kind of contradictory to the Ten Commandments. Then Muhammad comes to me, preaching and reciting the Quran, and he says it's a remembrance, he says it's a confirmation, and I see it's consistent with the vast majority of what I have heard within the other scriptures. And I'm like, yes, you see, this guy is a real prophet. He's confirmed, he's clearing up the confusions that I've had, and he's tapping into what the overarching narratives which I have experienced my entire life growing up in Israel. Do you now see the basis for the validity behind Muhammad's mission? Put yourself in the shoes of a child of Israel. You're hearing the Gospel of John, you're hearing Exodus, you're hearing the Ten Commandments, you're hearing all kinds of things, the book of Genesis, the book of Deuteronomy, and then suddenly this man comes and clears up a lot of the confusion you have in your mind. You're going to accept him as a valid prophet. This is the miracle of the Quran. It is a dhikr, it is a remembrance, it is a reminder, it is a furqan, it is a control. That is the function of the final revelation of God. And this error of assuming the Bible as one thing, this is really the quintessential blunder of the Christian world. When the Quran says, refer to the Tawrat, refer to the Injil, which Muhammad would not even say if he knew and he had access to these books and he was copying them, and he wouldn't say that because that would discredit him. But if by the Tawrat and the Injil we mean the Bible today, how could that be the case? How could the Quran be referring to the Bible when the Bible doesn't even refer to the Bible? There's nothing within any of these books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Judges, Kings, Matthew, Mark, there's nothing within any of these to suggest that the, 66 books in the Protestant canon, or 72 in the Catholic, I'm not sure, but whatever set of books the Christian debater you're dealing with holds to is the Bible. How could the Quran be referring to the Bible with the Tawrat, and when it talks about the Tawrat and the Injil, when the Bible doesn't even refer to the Bible? The Bible doesn't define what is canon and what's not. That is church tradition or a people's opinion as to what is canon and what isn't. Even you have the reformers, Martin Luther. He believed in the book of Revelation, then he tossed it out for a while, then he put it back in. You have guys like Drake, the Southern Israelite. He throws out the book of James and I think 2 Peter and Jude. Other Christians accept it. There's no definition for what the Bible is within the Bible. So the Quran cannot be referring to your text by default because it doesn't even refer to itself in that manner. Actually, when you look at this controversy of the various sects that have arisen and the historical process by which the Bible has been pruned and edited and books have been taken out and added in, this is giving credence to the Quranic mission. You all are admitting when people throw out the book of James or they throw out Revelation, then they put it back in and, 2nd Maccabees, and you have all these apocryphal works, you're saying that your books aren't perfect, that you're accepting that man-made accretions have entered into the deposit of faith, and now you're trying your absolute best to weed all of this stuff out. You are giving credence to the Quranic mission. You're admitting that we need something to clear this up. We need a confirmation and control over this. We don't know what's scripture and what's not because too many people, it even says in Jeremiah that the pen of the scribes hath wrought falsely, that people have written things and claimed they were from God when they're not. You're admitting this by your struggle of even putting together one consistent Bible. That is giving a platform to the Quran, which acts as a control. We don't need to go through all that mess because the Quran is the final standard. It lets us know what is true and what is not. So when I see something claiming that Jesus is the Son of God, and then I have the Quran telling me he clearly said he is not the Son of God, he's only a servant of the Lord, I can soundly disregard that. It's not just us that are disregarding biblical scriptures. You guys are disregarding biblical scriptures. You have a whole apocryphal library, which certain people access and put into the Bible, certain people take out, right? It's not just us that is arbitrarily picking and choosing what we like. It's you as well. Every Christian denomination has a certain theology. They have a certain view of Jesus, a certain portion of the Bible they favor, whether they favor Paul, whether they favor more of that Mosaic system, that Judaic system, whatever it is, and they either accept or reject certain writings based on the presuppositions they have. So it isn't just us, it's you as well. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out. Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naeem, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, In a few generations, our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim, and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with Him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative, holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God Himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled, A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, The link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their New World Order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my 3 biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of His oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.